You're listening to Legally Blissed Conversations. This podcast reclaims and rewrites the stories female attorneys have been told about how we should practice law, grow our businesses, treat our clients, treat ourselves, and craft our identities as female attorneys. We'll hear inspiring stories from current and former female attorneys, the ones who question the stories they've been told, the ones who aren't afraid to live boldly and step into their own power. We'll learn from women who define success on their terms. Through lighthearted and curious conversation, we'll unpack the challenges these inspiring female attorneys have already navigated. So join me on this journey. You'll be empowered and ready to rewrite a completely new story about what is possible for you. Well, hey there. I would like to welcome everyone to the Legally Blissed Conversations conference room, which is a regular roundtable where lady lawyers get together to discuss an impactful subject matter that we think can help our audiences better navigate life and law. My name is Susie Hickson, and I'm a trademark attorney and the founder of Legally Blissed Community. While female attorneys are incredible advocates for other people, I've learned that we're often not great self-advocates. So this community was developed to give female attorneys a platform to network and collaborate and support each other. Our community challenges social constructs about how female attorneys are taught to practice law and how we are supposed to show up as lawyers. In today's conference room, I am so happy to welcome three amazing attorneys who are also coaches for attorneys. We have Lauren Fair, Heather Moulder, and Amanda Stark. So before we start talking about coaching for lawyers and kind of coaching in general, I would love for each of my guests to give a little blurb about themselves. So we'll start with Lauren. Tell us about you.
All right, Susie, thanks. My name is Lauren Fair. I am a family law attorney in California. I'm based out of San Diego. I'm a partner in a family law firm. I've been practicing family law for about 15 years, exclusively in the area of divorce and related issues. And I coach women now to divorce confidently and sensibly while saving money throughout the process.
Awesome. And I'm sure your background as an attorney is fantastic for coaching in that area. I'm looking forward to us digging into that a little bit. All right, Heather, we'll go in alphabetical order.
Okay, great. So I'm Heather Moulder, and I am a recovering lawyer. I no longer practice. I was practicing, I guess, for over 18 years before I decided to leave the law. And I'm one of those people who thought I'd be a lawyer forever, never thought I'd leave, but battled breast cancer a number of years ago, didn't know it at the time. It changed everything I ever thought about myself and how I wanted to show up in the world, and it's ultimately what led me here. I now work primarily with lawyers and some other service professionals, but very lawyer-like, to help them become happily successful, because so often we go after what everybody else thinks we should do and forget what we actually want out of our careers and lives. And so I help my clients reconnect with the things that they truly find fulfilling and make them happy, and create a business and life that really supports them in that.
I love that you make it a point that it's not to be successful, but it's happily successful.
But we got a lot of successful attorneys out there who aren't very happy, so.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
All right, Amanda, your turn.
Yes, thank you for having me on, Susie. I'm excited for this conversation. My name is Amanda Stark, and I am a certified life coach and human design expert, and I coach women to help them create more purpose and fulfillment in their lives. And I use a combination of mindset coaching, human design expertise, and witchy magic to help women live life by their own rules. Because I actually was a healthcare compliance attorney, so a lawyer from a family of lawyers. So I basically made a career out of following the rules, and things only got better when I started breaking rules that really I didn't have to follow and started living by my own rules. And I help women do the same. Excited to talk about coaching with all of you today.
I am excited too. And I love that you're into human design, and I have an appointment scheduled with you in February. I'm so excited about it. Welcome again, ladies. So let's talk about coaching and coaching for lawyers specifically. So what is coaching?
Well, there's a million different ways you could describe it, I guess. I'm not a big fan of how most people describe it, because it's very like, it doesn't explain what we do at all. I think if you look at the ICF, the International Coach Federation website, it talks about it's a partnership between coach and client. Okay, well, what does that mean? Right? So my clients always come to me. They're very non-woo people for whatever reason. I'd really be loving to hear about the human design aspect and the way you pull that out of attorneys, because a lot of attorneys I see are get like really like anti-woo, but I think there is some room for it, and more attorneys need it. But I mean, I just like to tell my clients when they're like asking, well, what is it exactly that you do? How do you help people? Is say, look, you're meeting with somebody who's trained to listen more deeply, to hear on a different level what you're saying, how you're saying it, what you're not saying. If you're doing it in person or on video, seeing how you are, because there's a lot being conveyed in that. And we're trained to kind of like see you and hear you on a more deep level because of that, and to ask further questions so that we can pull out from you thoughts and beliefs and things that are going on in your mind that you don't even realize are in there, and are often a lot of what's going on inside of your head that's making you unhappy, that's, you know, creating assumptions about things that you don't even realize are there. I like, a lot of my clients tell me after they've worked with me, is you pulled thoughts and things out of my head that I had no idea were in there. So that's one avenue of it. And then the other avenue, as far as I'm concerned, at least, is to help you get clarity about what you really want out of your career and life, and then go actually achieve those things. So
have you noticed, how have you noticed coaching evolve over like the last few years, specifically with respect to us meeting via video? And when I say us, I mean just like your clients and coach, versus have, you know, kind of in the past, maybe people did phone coaching or they did it in person, but now with the proliferation of video, as easy as talking on the phone. I mean, for me, it's easier to do video than a phone call, just to be honest. But you know, I'm curious how that has changed for you guys as coaches, with actually being able to see your clients versus having phone calls with them.
Yeah, well, I think for me, it's just allowed me to help so many more people, because I can help clients anywhere versus clients that are just within my geographic location. Also, with the client, same thing. Years ago, when I was really ramping up my litigation practice, my partner and I were working with a business and life coach, and we went and we would see her in person, and that was amazing. But when we got really busy, it was one of those things that we just started, you know, being like, well, do we have time to drive all the way up there today and back? And, you know, you just don't have that anymore. Now it's like we can just pop on Zoom, and, you know, there's really no reason why we can't make time for that when it's so convenient now.
Yeah. Amanda, I'm really like curious also with what you do. I understand that kind of with your type of coaching, I would think that being able to visually read people and their facial expressions, for example, and just their body movement, would be very important.
Yes, because I coach a lot on intuition, and kind of the answer to your question, like what is coaching? For me, I really like to think of it as an avenue for building self-trust. So, which I think is especially important for women, because we aren't taught that. We're actually taught the opposite most of the time. So yeah, and as someone who coaches a lot in that intuitive space and energetic space, like just being able to see someone, and like I even have clients that their work in between sessions is to go watch their session back and see the difference in like their bodies when they are grounded in their intuition versus like up in their heads and rationalizing or waffling an indecision or whatever. And it's like, just see the difference in you when you're talking about something that is intuitively right for you versus something that you're trying to convince yourself of. And that just in and of itself. So I think it's helpful for me as a coach, but also can be really helpful for clients as well to have that opportunity to go back and watch their sessions, whether it's just to like hear it again or to see how their body looks or is behaving in certain situations.
yeah, when I started coaching, it was primarily phone, but then was starting to transition just after I started into video. And I started to try to do video, but most of my clients said, no, I don't want it, you know. And then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden everybody was on board with video, which I thought was really interesting. Except I do occasionally have a client. I have one right now who said no to video. So I'll do phone coaching if it's absolutely necessary for them. But I'd say 99% of my clients go with video.
Yeah. Interesting. So will you all tell me a little bit about what the difference is with coaching and therapy, and when when might an attorney kind of know when they are ready to look into getting a coach? I threw in two questions there.
All right.
Or Lauren?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll dive in. So I think for me, what I'm looking for with clients as to whether like therapy would be more appropriate for them or coaching is, therapy oftentimes is really focused on when we're not in a functional state, or having trouble meeting our daily, needs, like getting up, getting dressed, getting through the day, things like that. Like if you're not at a basic functioning level, then therapy may be something that would be better, suited for you at that particular point in time, or like in conjunction with coaching, depending on the situation, right? It's a case by case basis, I find, where you need to kind of make a judgment call as to what's best for that client in terms of what you would recommend to them. Past trauma processing. So if we're really just wanting to spend a lot of time in the past about something that's happened and really work through a trauma, I think oftentimes that's appropriate for therapy. And when we're working with a mental health diagnosis, and treatment around that, versus coaching, I think, is more where we're looking at where we are now and how we're going to optimize, our life from a functional point where it is now. And I think in the area in which I help clients, it's around things like the lived experience of divorce, the business of divorce. And this is applicable to any particular, that's just an example, right, in the divorce space, but like you can translate that to so many other areas. For example, like the lived experience of being an attorney, right? And how that impacts home and you in the office, the business of running, like a book of business, right? How dealing with clients, et cetera. And the three kind of main places where I can explain to clients that I can help them is oftentimes like around emotions and how we can use the power of emotions to really maximize our lives, making smart decisions as well, and education. And that kind of gets a little bit maybe into consulting too, when we're talking about education, but that oftentimes I think is relevant for attorneys getting coaching as well. So in terms of, Susie, your question about like when, would it be a good time to consider coaching? For me, I think it was knowing that, something in your life needed addressing, and maybe you don't know what that thing is. It just feels off. Like, you really want to improve your life in some way and you're not really sure what it is. Or maybe you even know what it is, but you don't know how to move forward with addressing it. So I think for me, it was when I was practicing burnout. Like I just was burnt out and was like, I can't do this forever like this. I don't want to die behind my desk like this someday. And so that's what originally led me to coaching. But it was like, I didn't know exactly how coaching was going to help me with that, but I just knew that I needed some assistance in figuring out what would be best for me.
Yeah, and that's an interesting story. I think that probably a lot of us kind of follow into coaching is we ourselves have had experienced something like burnout, right? Or feelings of stuck. And if you go back and listen to these episodes, all of Lauren, Heather, and Amanda have all been guests on this podcast. And I go into their personal stories that kind of takes you from graduating from law school, or actually maybe even why they went to law school, to where they are now. So those would be really interesting to go back and listen to. And I'll also link those in the show notes along with this podcast. Amanda, thoughts on when would be a good time to look into getting a coach, and what are your interpretations are of the difference in therapy and coaching?
Yeah, so I agree with everything Lauren said. And I actually think this is a thought I have a lot and don't say out loud a lot, but I think a lot of people who are in therapy probably need a coach and not a therapist. And especially given the fact that there is a shortage in mental health professionals like counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, all of those, that like if people who are just feeling a little off but are otherwise functioning, which I think is a great way that Lauren described it, like think about getting a coach and freeing up that hour every week for somebody who isn't functioning and is on a 3-month wait or something like that, because also those types of professionals are restricted by geography in most cases, where we as coaches are not. So we can help you from anywhere in the world as coaches, where therapists are limited by, even if they work with you on Zoom, licensing prevents them in most areas, at least in the US, right, from like working with someone in another state or, in another country. So just something to keep in mind. But otherwise, yeah, I think coaches are for functioning people who want to improve something in your life. I also think a misconception with coaching is you have to have a specific goal or know what it is you're working towards, when really it can just be like Lauren said, like, I don't want to die behind my desk like that. Or like, I am snapping at my kids every single day and I want to stop doing that. Like, how do I do that? How do I manage my reactions to things better? How can I be nicer to my partner? How can I wake up without the feeling of dread that I have to do another day at the office? Like, those are all things to get coaching on, even if you don't know what the end result is specifically when you start.
That's a really good point, Amanda.
Yeah, and I would add that I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about coaching versus therapy. And there's this idea that I find a lot of people, and this is coming from the therapy community a lot of times, that it's completely different, right? And you go see therapists for one thing and coaches for another. And yet I find that that's not necessarily the case. And perhaps it should be. Perhaps more people who are seeing therapists could and should go see coaches more often, because I do think there's definitely an overlap there of what some therapists help people with. But what coaches definitively don't do is we do not diagnose, we do not assess, we do not treat mental illnesses. We do not treat, and help with emotional healing from past trauma. You do emotionally heal yourself sometimes through coaching, but it's different and you're there for a different purpose. So if you're not functioning, I agree, like you need to go see a therapist. But there are definitely some overlaps. And I think that's where sometimes there's some confusion. So for example, reframing is something a lot of coaches use, right? And it comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. Therapists use it as well. And so, there are different tools and techniques that coaches do use that have been used in therapy. But just because they use them doesn't mean you need therapy either. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I see people coming to me with this confusion is, well, our coaches don't fix you. They don't even see you as needing fixing. It's really more about bringing out your natural strengths, your natural, who you are and your biggest potential so that you can fulfill whatever that is. And not needing to fix necessarily anything, just becoming better, if that makes sense.
I liken it to just up leveling your life. Like just, and you can be in therapy and still want to up level your life, right?
I have several clients right now who see a therapist and use me as their coach. So and it's for very distinct different purposes.
Yeah.
Although I have a feeling there is some overlap, because one of the reasons she came to me was for confidence, to become and feel more confident in her own skin, manage stress better, that kind of thing, right? Well, I'm certain she's talking about some of that stuff with her therapist too. But with her therapist, she's also got some past trauma and some other issues that she's dealing with that I would never touch.
Right.
So
thank God, right? So let's talk a little bit about the difference in coaching and consulting, because I see overlap in just marketing language sometimes with coaching and consulting, and they're different. So I'd love to hear you all kind of your perspectives on the differences and overlaps as well.
Yeah, I think consulting, in my mind, consulting is like, I am going to tell you the right way, right? Or like give you this like step-by-step guide to follow. And I do think some coaches in marketing will be like, I've got this 3-step process for losing weight or whatever the thing is, right? But I think the coaching least the way that I think of coaching, the way I coach is much more about like, let's find a solution that works best for you, which may not be a solution that works for me or works for my other clients or whatever. And especially like with my coaching, it's very personalized based on their own human design and their way of operating. So I wouldn't like, I don't even do sales calls the same, like with different types of people and different types of charts, because I'm honoring the way they're designed to make decisions, for example. So I do think consulting is a much more like strategy action oriented type of profession, and consulting is a much more like collaborative mindset focused situation instead of like just pound it out and get it done.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, in thinking about this, coaching focuses on like facilitating the client finding their own solutions, and consulting involves some aspect of like me telling you what the solution is, or like Amanda said, like providing kind of like a process or steps to go through. I do a combination of consulting and coaching when I'm coaching people on divorce, because that we necessarily touch on things that are like very specific to where my expertise is in, even if it's just around divorce related topics or the process itself or what have you. So I think, you know, whenever we're really getting into more like strategy, I guess, as opposed to mindset focus, oftentimes that's where we're bringing in consulting. And in the context of attorneys, I think that could be in marketing or, you know, things that are more related to the business of being an attorney potentially, is where you may find consulting pop up. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, Susie.
Yeah, I've noticed that when I work with clients, and not from the legal perspective, but when I've done consulting and a little bit of coaching, I generally tend to quickly fall into a consulting role for people. It's much more natural for me. And Amanda, you may start like looking into this, like when you do my human design. I'm like, I was filling out the stuff the other day. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm giving her my birthday and like where I'm born and all of these things, and she's gonna be able to like know all of these things about me. It's gonna be super witchy. But yeah, so I look at it the same way, right? Where consulting is similar to advising, right? Here's the template. Here's how to get from A to B. Whereas again, like you said, coaching is very much like helping you find the answers within. I'm kind of one of those people. I'm like, I know I've got the answer here. I'm ready to solve this problem right now. And for me to kind of have that patience, and I think a lot of coaches, the beauty of so many coaches that I've worked with, they're so patient and they really create the space for me as a client to help me look at my own brain and help me look at my own thinking, right? And I think it takes a really special person to be able to create that space for someone else. I feel like I struggled a little bit with that, because I was like, let's get the answer out right now. You know, like I was like, I know I have the answer. Let's just solve this thing. So it's really interesting. And that's why I love talking with you guys, because you all are also lawyers you've been in problem solving role mode for many, many years. And so once you put on a coaching hat, for you, particularly as former lawyers, I know Lauren still practices, it's got to be a big mindset shift for you as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think I do remember when I first started coach training and then started coaching people, how hard it was to just zip it and be quiet. And remembering that silence was always like such a key to like giving people space to like, because people will answer a question, and then if you're silent long enough, they'll go deeper.
They'll keep going, right? Yeah.
I had to learn that big time. And now it's probably one of my biggest gifts that I do really well, but it took me a long time. And of course, I do a hybrid model of coaching / consulting. You know this, Susie, because I do two types of coaching. So part of my practice is mindset and leadership coaching, and that's more pure coaching. Whereas I also do business coaching, which people hire me for my expertise. I'm supposed to give them some advice, in my opinion, to some extent, right? And so I have over the years had to learn how to like create a hybrid model where I give them the space and I actually do coach for certain things and for a time, but then I also know how to insert my opinion and let them know what my thoughts are and where I would go. What I've learned though is never to just tell them, here's what you have to do, or here's what you should do. Instead, it's, well, have you tried? Or here's what I've seen works. Or you change your language a little bit and it helps you kind of stay in coach mode a little bit better, I think.
Yeah.
When you're consulting.
Yeah. And oh, go ahead. Amanda. Was that Amanda? Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah. I was just going to say, what I think there's space for, but like, I think sometimes coaching doesn't mean you never have an opinion or you never offer a suggestion or a thought, like, which I think is different than telling someone like, this is what you should do, like Heather was saying. And certainly with my coaching, like I do a lot of educating on what it means for like what aspects of your chart mean. I don't expect my clients to figure that out on their own. That is literally why I'm there and why they work with me. So it's to help them figure it out and then implement it. So I do think there's a nice balance. But going back to your question, I found it so refreshing to not have to be the one with the answers. And maybe that's just because of what I did, like as a compliance attorney. And I also, most of my practice was training and education for my clients, and I taught certification courses and all of that. So it was just like I was constantly the resource, and it's federal law, so it doesn't change very often. And it's just like, yes, this is the answer. No, this is not the answer. Like there's no gray. And so it was just having like getting to explore all of this, the rest of it, the like non-black and white, non-linear aspect of the world. I was so ready for it. Like, I'm so happy not to have to tell anybody like, no, you can't do that ever again. Like if I never have to say that ever again, other than to my children and my dog, then I will be happy.
I love that. You get to explore the possibilities with them.
Yes.
Yeah. Susie, can I just offer one personal experience with this? It's relevant.
Yeah.
So I just think the opportunity to have a coach hold space for you, especially if they have a similar background to you in the sense that, they're an attorney as well, they understand the challenges that you face, is just so powerful. Because I came to coaching, with an acute issue, right? Like the burnout that I talked about. And that's oftentimes how people come into coaching, is they've got something really pressing in their lives that they want to resolve. But then after you do the work and you resolve a lot of those things, then the question is like, do I continue on with a coach or not? Do I really need one? And I think for me, at some point, it became less about like, do I need one? Or is it really just, do I want one? And how is it just like fun and a real up level for my life in general to have one on an ongoing basis, even when I don't have something that is, like the bleeding issue or whatever of the day. My husband is also an attorney, and I found that sometimes like I would go to him wanting coaching, right? My first mistake, really. and he very much like what Heather was saying, like he just wants to fix the problem, right? Because that's kind of what we were just trained to do. It's like, oh, okay, here's the problem. Okay, here's my solution. Done. And I found myself kind of unfulfilled in those discussions around like, I really wanted someone to just hold space for me and help me talk through what the issue was and how I was going to solve that particular issue, right? Like, and maybe that some of the consulting comes in where the coach understands the situation and can provide some kind of education on something or an idea, but also like having the coach be neutral and not telling you what you should do or not judging you for whatever you ultimately decide to do. And it's just such a fulfilling experience and a relationship, in my opinion, when you're able to have that connection with someone. And it just helped me move forward so much more quickly with things that would come up on a weekly basis, right? Big or small, just to have that space to come and talk it through. And I found that it actually improved relationships too within like my circle. For just using my example with my husband, like I stopped putting the pressure on him to be like everything, right? And we do that, I think, right? Like we expect the people closest to us in our lives to serve all of these purposes, some of which they don't they don't want to fulfill, or they're just unable to fulfill. Like they have the best of intentions, like my husband, like, what's the problem? I'm giving you the answer. Like, let's just move on. Why is this not sufficient? And but it really, it's not what you needed. And so when you can take that pressure off, of maybe for you, it's, a parent or a best friend or whatever it is. I just found that was like a collateral impact to my life that was, unexpected, I guess, from having a coach.
Let's take a quick pause for a message from my sponsor, Prominent Practice.
Are you thinking about a career transition from BigLaw or partnership to a solo practice, selling your practice, or maybe you're launching a project unrelated to law? Whatever the reason for your transition, you'll need support along the way. Enter Prominent Practice, an executive consulting and marketing firm specializing in branding, positioning, and reputation management for transitioning attorneys. Founded by a female entrepreneur who spent a decade building smart digital platforms for thought leaders before pivoting to focus on high-end service providers who were preparing for successions, mergers, and acquisition events in their businesses. If you're thinking about making a big business move, don't risk losing the ability to leverage the reputation you've spent your career building. Let Prominent Practice be your guide. Visit prominentpractice.com/blissed for an exclusive introduction.
Yeah, and I think Lauren makes a great point about you don't have to have a very specific problem or reason to go to a coach. And I think a lot of attorneys incorrectly assume that is the case. They think they have to be fixed for that reason. Like, I'm supposed to have a problem. I'm a problem child to go to coaching. And this is something I see a lot in law firms. They only send the people they think are problems unless they're executive level. And then they send them to leadership, and executive coaches. And it's like, no. It could be for everybody, because everybody can and deserves to be able to up level their own, everyday existence, how they approach things, their practice, whatever it is. And what I find is people who come to coaching with that viewpoint are the ones that have the most success, in all honesty. They're more open to trying new things. And I call it a fast forward button. I think, Lauren, you said something very similar, that it fast forwards your progress more quickly, because it gives you that free space to just think out loud and brainstorm and be creative. And we don't give ourselves that space as attorneys very often. And so that's one thing that coaching can and does provide, is that space where we need our brains to just dump out everything that's on our minds. We have something we're thinking about, but we're not sure. And there's a lot going on in there that we don't even realize is in there because we don't give it that time. And coaching can provide you that space. And then the coach is also trying to help pull it out more quickly so that you can then come up with a better decision more quickly for what you want to do moving forward.
I love referring to it as the fast forward button, right? It's or the level up, right? Like if you're playing a video game and you get to level up on something, that's kind of what I feel like that's what coaching is. And I've been fortunate to have a variety of coaches for just different things. And I feel very just blessed that I've been able to do that, because I feel like it has up-leveled me in a lot of ways. And I've had coaches in different periods of my life that have kind of helped me where I am in a decision, or kind of maybe what I was going through. And what I think is really interesting about it is there are coaches out there, right? There are plenty of coaches out there, and you could get really stressed about, will I find the right coach? How do I find the right coach? I have to make sure I get the right coach and all this. But I just believe in serendipity, and that the coach that you're supposed to have at a particular time in your life, you'll know, they'll be there. So if I were just someone, let's say I'm a lawyer who's never worked with a coach, how would I go about, I guess, finding a coach and figuring out if that coach was a right fit for me, assuming they weren't someone like me who believes in serendipity and that the teacher comes when the student is ready, right?
Yeah, first, if you know somebody who's working with a coach, ask for a referral. Like that's always the best place to start. Someone that knows you, and knows like who would be a good match for you or what they think, would be beneficial to you. So I think that's step one, is to ask for that. And then two, if you're looking in a, think about what you're looking for, follow them or check them out or whatever. But really, in my opinion, the most important thing with a coach is feeling comfortable in that coach's space. Like, because like Laura mentioned before, this is someone who you're going to spend a lot of time with, who's going to hold a lot of space for you. And so you just need to be comfortable saying whatever it is you need to say, or like being open with that. Like I saw my coach this morning and I was like in full on tears at the beginning of the call. Like she was just like, "How are you?" And I was like, "Not good." And started sobbing. So I'm much better now after getting coached. But it was just like, if I didn't have that comfort level with her, right, that to do that, then my coaching session wouldn't be useful. And then I also think, like, going to something Lauren said before, is like my issue started yesterday, and like, because I knew I had coaching this morning, like when my partner's like, "What do you need? What can I do?" Like I was able to tell him like, "Nothing, let's just like hang." I got a hug and some support, and then we had hung out, and I was like, "Okay, I don't need him to do anything for me right now. Like I'm going to bring it to coaching tomorrow and work through it on my own, and I can just like set it aside." But so I think comfort level and like finding someone that you resonate with is more important than whatever they say their particular thing is that they work on.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, Amanda, because that was kind of the next thing I was going to ask, is about coaching specialties. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. Okay, Heather.
No, I would just second everything she said. You need to talk to whomever you're considering. Don't be afraid to talk to a couple of people and go with who you feel is the best fit for you, your personality, what you're looking for, all of the above. Any good coach will allow you to talk to them and get a sense of who they are and ask questions and give you an idea of what they see, you moving forward on, how you would work together, that type of a thing. So definitely do your due diligence in that way and go with your gut, because your gut there is very telling. Anytime I have not in the past, when I first started getting into coaching, I hired a coach to help me, because we have to have mentor coaches. And I kind of had a sense that I wasn't sure, and I was right. And it ended up not being a disaster, but not the best that it could have been, right? And then I later found another mentor coach who was way better for me. She was just a better fit. So go with your gut and don't feel bad about saying no. I would also say, when it comes to referrals, you may not know who's worked with a coach, but don't be afraid to ask people who you look up to, who are pretty successful, because you'd be surprised how many of them have worked with coaches. Lawyers don't often tell other people that they do, but if somebody comes asking, they're more than willing to say, "Oh yeah," and then they refer if they like the person that they worked with. So
it's a really good point. Sometimes you just need to ask. Don't expect that people are just going to have it on their t-shirt that says, "I worked with Heather."
Right.
Lauren saved my sanity during my divorce, right? Like people are not going to necessarily display that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely with everything that Amanda and Heather said. And I would just add that, like, as part of that process of determining, is this somebody that I resonate with? Am I comfortable with them? That could be determined through, I think, ideally a consultation, but also most coaches have so much free content available out there in different ways. Like some have podcasts, right? Some have just even content on their website. Maybe they have like a download of something that they've put together that's relevant to their clients, and just through consuming whatever that free content is that that coach is offering, a lot of times you're going to be able to determine, do I sort of align with this person? Like, is what they're saying, are they my people, right? And social media too, right? A lot of them have social media. So those are all great ways of getting some better idea in advance about, is this somebody that I want to, potentially work with?
Yeah, it's going to help you narrow it down, I think, because there's so many out there, right?
Yeah. And I just want to add too, like, not in opposition to what Heather said, because certainly like talk to as many, like if you want to talk to multiple people and do that. But I think like what Lauren said, like getting a feel for someone before you get on the call. And if like thinking about, okay, I'd really like to hire a coach, especially because I know we're talking to female attorneys, right? So if like thinking like you need to shop around for a coach and be on a bunch of different calls, if that is an obstacle to you getting started, then just do what Lauren said. Like do your due diligence in your jammies at night on Instagram and then schedule one call. And if your gut says yes, allow that to be, going back to Susie's serendipity, right? Like you were drawn to that person for a reason. So just do what feels better to you. If picking one and going with it feels better to you, do that. If shopping around, I hate that term, but if you're like, oh, I can't decide between these two or these three, schedule multiple consults, right? Like coaches, of course, all of us want to talk to you and want it to be a good fit, to be a success.
Right.
Well, and I do not recommend shopping around. I'm saying if you talk to somebody and you don't feel like you're a fit, go elsewhere. There's a million coaches out there. Yes. If you feel like you need to shop around or you've done your due diligence and it's down to 2, then talk to those 2 people. I wouldn't recommend you talk to 4 or 5 people. It's going to make it way too confusing.
Yes, 100%.
You don't need a spreadsheet or anything like that.
No.
Yes. None of that. So chill out, ladies. Because I know how we are, right? We have to have all of this. We have to have our notes and our spreadsheet about our meeting at 3:00 with Amanda, and then all of this. So, and then also, if they're, I've spoken with people before, and I'm like, oh, I think I would really love to work with her, but maybe now isn't not the right time. But I can coach. Maybe she could be my coach later, right? Just because you go with one coach now doesn't mean that you're not going to want to work with that other or that you couldn't work with that other person at a later date, right? So maybe that will kind of help alleviate some anxiety around selecting a coach. And really there shouldn't be any anxiety around it, right? It should be fun and exciting because it's something that we get to do. Darn it, we get to do this. We get to have coaches, so it should be a fun process of selecting the coach.
Yeah.
So I would love to know one of your favorite success stories in working with a client. Obviously, don't mention any names, but I would love to know specifically, like the biggest transformation that you saw, or maybe just who had some of the most positive results and kind of how that made you feel. And I would also, I guess we kind of need to wrap this up. We're getting close to time, but I'd also love for you to also let us know where to find you on the internet and LinkedIn and all of your socials. So we'll go with Amanda.
Okay. You asked that question and I had like a movie montage scroll across my mind. I'm like, who do I pick? What do I say? Oh gosh. Okay. I'm just going to go with this one. Yeah, I coached with a woman, and we coached her and her husband were separated when we started working together, but she was very much in the space of like wanting to get back together. And every call she'd show up and very down, very like, this isn't working, right? They had like, we were scheduled, they had their couples counseling the night before, and then she'd see me the next day, right? So it was always like processing that and going through that. And then after working together and coached on all the things, she's like, I don't think we're going to get back together. And she goes, I don't think I want to. And it was just everything in her had shifted. And I just was like, we need to take a moment to just like how huge this decision is for you, from going from like clinging to something to, and I don't coach specifically on relationships. That just happened to be what we spent most of our time talking about it during that time period. But just seeing the shift, like seeing the weight lift off of someone of like something that they've been carrying. So that's just one example that came to mind, but that's something that's one of my favorite things, is just like letting something go or accepting something and like just seeing the visible weight lift off of someone. I think is just amazing to see as a coach.
I was going to ask you, you probably saw physical changes in her body and her face.
Yes. I mean, everything about her was different. Like I can't even, like if you would have taken a side by side, it would look like years apart, not like this was the week before and this was today. Like just seeing the total shift in her was huge. It was it was mind blowing. I honestly have to say. And like, especially because it was just like, we'd been picking the thread. Like, I kind of think sometimes problems like that, it's like when you get your necklace tangled, like you can't just yank it. Like you've got to pull each little piece of it until finally it comes loose. And it was like, okay, it's loose now. All right, now let's take it from here. Like we've got it untangled. Do we want to wear it? So yeah, I
Good
think.
analogy. I like that.
Thank you.
Which is awesome.
So yeah. And then, where you can find me was the second part. So I am most active on Instagram. You can find me at Glitter and Gravitas on Instagram. That's also my Facebook handle and my website, glitterandgravitas.com. I do have a blog on my website that has tons of information about all of the things that I do and tons of human design resources. So you can check me out there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Heather.
Okay, so it's hard to pick, as you know, but I think there's one thread that goes through all of my most successful cases, whether they come to me for mindset coaching or for business development strategy / coaching. And it's ultimately the mindset piece, right? That's the most fulfilling, and that's what really changes people's lives. And so there was this one client who came to me for both, but when she came to me, she was very self-described glass is half empty type person and had no boundaries, she wanted to get a handle on her stress, create some boundaries, and she knew it, but she'd been trying to do it for a long time and hadn't. And within a couple of months, the transformation that happened when she just went a little deeper and let go of a couple of things and then moved forward. Not only did she describe herself as a glass is half full person, but she said her glass was overflowing. She realized she finally had more time to do the things she cared about the most, including developing her business and doing the things she needed to do. But she had the time for her family because her family is important. And not just time, and it ended up not being so much about time, but the way she showed up because her glass was no longer half empty, but was overflowing. And so that was probably the most exciting. As far as the descriptions that she gave, that's, you see this a lot in coaching, but sometimes people are just like, so like clear, like, oh, perfect example of what you want to see. So.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
And then where to find me. So I am on LinkedIn primarily, Heather Moulder, Moulder. It's not spelled like Mulder from the X-Files. I used to get a lot of X-Files jokes. My husband's name's Mulder. He really used to get a lot of those jokes. And then my podcast, I have a podcast. It's called the Life and Law Podcast at lifeandlawpodcast.com. And you can also reach me at coursecorrectioncoaching.com, where I have tons of resources, a blog, and plenty of things for you if you would like to check them out.
A great example of all of you all are great examples of being able to consume the coach's content to kind of understand if you would be a good fit working together. You all produce a lot of content. It's very impressive. Lauren.
Yes. So the emotional transition and even like I think Amanda was mentioning earlier, like the physical transformation that I see in clients from the beginning to the end of their coaching and the divorce process that I take them through is really the reason that I started focusing on coaching more and moving away from litigation, because I just got so much fulfillment from helping people in a more kind of holistic manner and in a way that helped them not just get through the legal process, but to transition their whole lives, right, from where they had been prior to separation into like what is now a completely different, life for them. It's a traumatic process, separating, right, after you've been married. And just seeing how much the clients changed from beginning to end was just really inspiring for me. So I think it's hard to think of one in particular, but I do have one that does come to mind. And when she came to me, she had a lot of guilt around the end of the relationship. And I found that guilt, as we kind of dug into that, was really affecting how she was addressing the divorce. And kind of through working together, we looked at the ways that the guilt was showing up for her in terms of like the decisions she was making or not making in the process, in what she was proposing in terms of a resolution, and things that would have very long-term impacts on her life. And once we were able to really look at why she was doing those things, and I always take the approach of, like, my clients, their legal case and it's their life, right? They can always do whatever it is that they want to do. There's not a right or a wrong decision from my perspective, but we just want to be really intentional about what it is they're doing and why, and do they like that? And is that something that they're going to be okay with 5 or 10 years down the road? And so in her situation, she was able to kind of work through the guilt that she had and other similar kind of negative, right, feelings, and decide to make a different decision about how she wanted to proceed with the divorce and the resolution that she wanted to get from it. That if we had not done that work, she was about to make a really significant decision that we know as lawyers, like, you put something in a settlement agreement, you can't decide 3 months later, well, I'm in a different emotional place now, and I kind of want to, like, redo that. It's not that easy,
right?
Yeah.
Go take backsies or whatever it is.
Yeah. So I think, for her, it was a really meaningful work, because we were able to head off what she could identify was not something that she wanted to give up, right? Or something that she'd be okay with giving up 5-10 years down the road, even though right now it felt like, some guilt was driving some decision making that, may have otherwise led to that. And I think the other thing is just, it's fulfilling for me, and it showed up with this particular client, is when they come in, they don't understand legal process. And a lot of the things that go around hiring attorneys, right? Like so oftentimes that's the first time they've ever interacted with an attorney, is when they're getting a divorce. So, the education piece with all of that, and being able to see her go from being overwhelmed by the legal process and all of that to having a good understanding of what all of that entailed. And also, I think a lot of women in the situation are very concerned about the impact on their kids. And that was a situation with her in this situation too, around, like, how do we approach what is, like, an ongoing legal issue, right? Because, like, with family law, it's not like it's civil or criminal where you look, backward to an event that's over and now we're assigning liability or responsibility to something. With family law, it's like there's something happening every single day that's changing the landscape of what we're dealing with. And how do you handle those things best for your kids? And so I think in that situation, we were able to do that in a way that was minimizing the impact on her kids and really setting them up for a successful transition. So.
Wow, that's amazing. And she hadn't had coaching, then she might have made the wrong decision, right? Because maybe the decision would have been coming out of fear or anger, or, as you kind of put in air quotes, a negative emotion. Because as coaches, we don't love, like, calling certain emotions positive or negative necessarily.
Right.
I'm curious, really quickly, Lauren, when you coach, like, even though you're an attorney based in California, can you coach someone from a different jurisdiction around the divorce process, I presume?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes, that I have. And in some ways, I've found that it's actually really useful, because I don't know the answer to some of the things, which is actually helpful for my client. It helps empower my client then, because what I am able to do, though, is take, like, my understanding of the legal process in California and imagine, like, what the questions would be that we would need to have the answers to in another state, right, to be able to understand all of that. So in that situation, it's oftentimes about highlighting what might be concerns based upon my experience and helping the client come up with, questions to take to the appropriate licensed professional in that state to get the answers to, so that she can bring that information back and we can use all of that to make the best decisions, along the way.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine how amazing it would be to have a coach through the divorce process. Like that, just being able to have someone that would help you through that. It has to be just incredible. Super people that get to, when they're going through such a challenging part of their life, like, they're just so blessed to get to do that, to get to work with you.
Well, thank you. I really wish I had a coach when I was going through my divorce. I had just the year prior, left a law firm where I was an associate, and I was working on building a solo practice at that time. And that's when I got divorced. So talk about like an acute entry point into coaching, right? Like that would have been amazing for me to have a coach then, because it's like, how do you keep, showing up for your clients and your business and everything while, there are other aspects of your life that are kind of coming apart. And so, yeah, there's definitely my younger associate self or younger attorney self would have really benefited from that. And I think there's a lot of parallels in that for you, for your clients too. It doesn't have to be divorce, right? It could just be something else major happening in their life. And like, how do they continue to show up for their clients and, their job in the way that they want to, while all these other things are happening around them, right? Like, how do you maintain that focus and that productivity and that forward movement with all those things going on? So I think, that it's a huge benefit to your clients.
Huge benefit.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Guys, I want to thank all of you all for being here. This has been so enlightening. As a coach, I know that I even still learned a lot. Lauren, I would love for you to tell everyone where they can find you as well. And then we're going to wrap this one up today.
Yeah, sure. You can find me on my website at laurenfaircoaching.com. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Lauren Fair Coaching, and on LinkedIn, Lauren Fair.
Awesome. I will have everyone's links in the show notes. Thank you all again for being here. And if you're ready to hit the power up button, make sure you think about getting a coach. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susie.
Bye. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today on Legally Blissed Conversations. If you love this episode and you want to hang out with other inspiring and light gold female attorneys, be sure to join the Legally Blissed community at legallyblissed.com. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at Susie Hickson. See you next time.